Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm Cynthia, the microbiologist. So today I have a very special topic. I'll take you guys on food poisoning. So today we are going to talk about food poisoning, the bacteria that causes food poisoning, and symptoms and how many hours they stay before they become reactive to the system. And I'm also going to list out signs that shows you or anyone around you has just eaten foods that are contaminated, which results to food poisoning. So before I go further, I would like you to know food poisoning is actually illness caused by eating foods that are contaminated by microorganisms like bacteria, viruses, or toxins. So now I'm going to list out some bacteria that causes food poisoning. Number one on my list is Campylobacter. Number two is Staphylococcus aureus. Number three is Bacillus cereus. Another one is Salmonella, and another one is Shigella. And we have the E. coli. We have Clostridium botulinum. We have Vibrio and Listeria monocytogenes. These are microorganisms that causes food poisoning. So I'm going to tell you how and why they cause food poisoning. I'm also going to list out some food sources, like where and how they contaminate these meals. So number one on my list is Campylobacter. This microorganisms contaminates foods like canned foods, the ones that are not properly packaged, canned foods, vegetables, raw foods, and milk and raw meats. So these are the type of foods that are contaminated by Campylobacter. It stays 1 to 6 hours before it begins to react in the body system. So number one of the signs of eating a food that is contaminated by Campylobacter is weakness of the muscle. You also have blood vision. These are signs that you have just eaten a meal that is contaminated by Campylobacter. Again is diarrhea. You have bloody or watery diarrhea. We have the abdominal pains. These are signs of eating meals that are contaminated by Campylobacter. Number two on my list is Salmonella. So I'm going to list out meals that Salmonella organisms could, contaminate and the signs. So Salmonella contaminates foods like poultry, eggs, and meat, pork, and eggs. These are foods that are contaminated by Salmonella. So there are signs that you have just eaten a meal that is contaminated by Salmonella. Number one on my list is weakness, diarrhea, especially the blood or watery diarrhea, and vomiting. So another one on my list is Staphylococcus aureus. Foods that could be contaminated by Staphylococcus aureus, and where you can find these organisms. You can always find this organism in the nose, you can find it on the skin, in raw milk, in foods that are improperly frozen, and or cheese and juice. This is where you find organisms like Staphylococcus aureus. So I'm going to state out symptoms that shows that you have just consumed a meal that is contaminated by Staphylococcus aureus. Number one, abdominal pain, and number two is diarrhea, and number three is lower than normal temperature. Your body temperature becomes lower than is normal. The hour of incubation is 1 to 6 hours. This is how long it stays in our body before it becomes reactive. That's before you begin to have the signs that you have been poisoned. Number three is Clostridium botulinum. So this is microorganisms that contaminates foods and canned foods, especially the canned foods, homemade canned foods and vegetables and meat. This is uh, this is the source, like where you can find these organisms, the foods they can contaminate. And when you ingest a food that have been contaminated by Clostridium botulinum microorganisms, the hour of incubation, like it stays 1 to 6 hours before it becomes reactive to your system. And there are signs that shows you that, oh, you are sick, you have just consumed food that is not healthy for you. So number one sign is blood vision. Number two is weakness of the muscles. Number three is diarrhea. Number three is kidney failure, and death. Yes, Clostridium botulinum is actually a very dangerous one, and if it's so severe, it's advised you go and see your physician. Another one is Clostridium perfringens. So this is found in excretal, soil, incense, and raw meat. These are places you can find these bacteria. These are places it contaminates our foods from. So when you eat a meal that is contaminated by this organism, there are signs that shows you like I've just been poisoned, and these signs are abdominal pains and diarrhea. So when you have these signs, it shows you that you've just consumed a meal that is contaminated by Clostridium perfringens. Another one on my list is Bacillus cereus. So Bacillus cereus source where you can find these organisms is in fried rice, in salads, milk, and soup. These are places you can find these microorganisms. So these are foods they can contaminate. So signs that you have just eaten a meal that is contaminated, a meal that is contaminated by Bacillus cereus. One is vomiting, and number two is diarrhea and nausea. These are signs that you have just consumed a meal that is contaminated by Bacillus cereus. How you can prevent yourself from, staying away from food poisoning and staying away from bacteria that could contaminate our foods at home or anywhere, any places. Number one is good personal hygiene. You have to teach your family members or your friends or your kids how to, keep a good hygiene by teaching them to wash their hands before they eat. And also you can, teach your toddlers to wash their hands after they are done playing, wash their hands whenever they want to eat something. These microorganisms, they mostly attack children because they don't really have control to how they use their hands and to what they put in their mouth. Another way you can curb the access of food poisoning is by refrigerating our foods that have a quick spoilage, refrigerating them at a good freezing point. You refrigerate your foods properly to avoid spoilage and these organisms contaminating or thriving in our foods. Another one is by, trying to separate food items like the raw meat, the seafoods, the eggs or poultry. You put them in a separate shelf. Like when you want to refrigerate them, try to make separation. Put them separately from other food items that could contaminate these foods, so that make sure that your waters are boiled or well treated to avoid microorganisms thriving in them. I hope you enjoyed this session as much as I did, and I hope to see you here again in our next health sensitization. Thank you. I love you guys.